Something as simple as going to therapy can ground a pilot for anywhere from 6 months to the rest of their career. So the next time you step foot on a commercial flight, please remember that there's more than a 50% chance that the person flying your airplane has avoided seeking any necessary mental health care. Most pilots are afraid to speak up because they rely on flying as their livelihood. But I don't, and that's why I'm able to share the story that you're about to hear. Dear Xyla Foxlin, on weekends, we have received and reviewed your psychiatric and psychological evaluations in their entirety. It is with great regret that we inform you that after careful evaluation of these reports, we have determined that you do not meet the medical standards prescribed in Title 14. It is with great regret. It is with great regret. Hey everyone, day one of Hangar Makeover, which is hopefully only a 2-day process. Welcome to my name is Xyla Foxlin. I am a full-time social media creator. I build things. I have a background in mechatronics engineering, which is like the intersection of mechanical and electrical engineering. So a lot of what I do is I build campers and boats and airplanes and rockets and like things that travel and take you on adventures, basically. And I am also a pilot and the proud owner of a 1946 Cessna 140 named Lady Lamar, and she's my baby. Flying is the one thing that I have been interested in my entire life. As a little kid, I remember I just wanted to physically fly.
I'm Xyla Foxlin, and I'm a student pilot from Lexington, Massachusetts.
I got my pilot's license in 2020, and then I immediately, like within a month, I packed up and I moved to LA.
So I'm about to go look at this Cessna 140 for the first time.
I bought my airplane at the end of 2021. Like the first $20,000 I made on YouTube, I spent on my airplane, which is not a great financial choice, but it was, I think, very good for my soul. My younger self would never have believed that I even got my pilot's license or the fact that I owned an airplane. And then I had so many good adventures in her.
I just flew coast to coast, like Atlantic to Pacific in my 1946 85 horsepower Cessna 140.
And then I had to go get my IUD replaced.
Well, it's been known for some time that the presence of a foreign body in the uterine cavity materially affects reproductive processes.
For context, an IUD is an intrauterine device. It's one of the most common forms of birth control. What I have now learned is that when you insert an IUD, they release way more of the synthetic hormones per day than at the end of it. So the first year of an IUD, you're getting almost twice as many hormones per day as the last 4 years of an IUD. So your body gets used to this very stable curve at the bottom, and that's what I had been experiencing. I went in this super high point in my life. Literally everything felt like it was going really well. And then it was instantly gone. I was upset about everything, and I was just depressed out of nowhere all of a sudden. I remember posting this beach picture. I was in the fetal position in my bed, and just like everything else I posted that month, it had been taken before the IUD was placed. I walked out of the hospital a different person. It was so jarring, and it super threw me off. I cannot describe how strange it is to become a whole new person overnight. It's weird. And no one around you knows what's happening or expects it.
How did you deal with that?
Not that well. So I messaged my gynecologist about it, and she said hormones wouldn't affect my mood like this. It's probably something else. And so I went to my primary care, and she did believe me. And this was one of those, I should have clarified that I was a pilot and that she couldn't, this is what really screwed me over, was she put major depressive disorder in my chart so that I could get a referral to a psychiatrist that worked down the hall from her. I went and talked to that psychiatrist, and we ended up deciding not to pull it out. We decided to leave it in, mostly because I had had an IUD previously and I had stabilized eventually. If you can ride out that hockey stick, maybe it'll get better.
So how long did you go on feeling as bad as you described?
At the very beginning, I was told 3 weeks. I remember thinking, I don't know how I'm gonna get through 3 weeks of this. And then it became 3 months, and then it became 6 months. But I don't think I felt like myself until a year. I had self-grounded myself. Like, I wasn't flying through this period, but I did not turn myself into the FAA, because once you do that, you get grounded for an indeterminate amount of time. The FAA is the Federal Aviation Administration. They regulate the entirety of airspace for the United States. As a licensed pilot who holds a third-class medical, I'm not allowed to go to therapy. I'm not allowed to get mental health treatment. And those were all things that I was doing. No one wants to say this out loud, but the advice just passed through every flight school, absolutely everywhere, was unless there's something catastrophic on your record, don't say anything. Don't ever self-report, particularly for mental health. I felt really mistreated by my gynecologist and the way women's health is treated generally, and I really wanted to say something about it. We have spent so many years being conditioned to just suck things up, and that our sexual health isn't important, and that being in physical and emotional pain is just a non-negotiable part of being a woman. Also, I had to refuse any kind of diagnosis or medication because I refused to put my pilot's license or my flight medical at risk. Flying is one of the most important things in the world to me, and one of the ways I escaped and got through some of those really rough patches. And the FAA has some incredibly antiquated views on mental health. When I posted that video, half my friends were like, shut up, sit down, keep your pilot's license. This is not worth, you've already been through hell. Why are you gonna make it worse? And the other half were like, we are all hiding in the shadows and none of us can say anything because our entire income comes from holding a medical. I think at the time I felt like saying something was more important than my right to fly. Now I don't know how I feel about that, because I've had a lot of really fun adventures in my airplane, but we're here. I knew almost immediately that I was reported not because I heard from the FAA, but because someone left a comment that was like, the rules of the FAA are written in blood. How dare you think you're above them? I've reported this video and downloaded it in case you tried to delete it. And then it probably took 2 months before I got a letter from the FAA. The letter was basically like, you have been reported to the FAA, send us, and then it had a bulleted list. This is one of the most invasive letters I've ever seen. And then I had to go see a aviation psychiatrist to basically deem me not crazy. So I show up and I'm fully better at this point. I have been operating at my normal 100% for a while. I'm peak Xyla. Xyla's back. So honestly, he has this girl walk in. I nail the cognitive tests and all of the normal testing.
Said I did really well on cognitive testing and that I don't need to come back tomorrow, actually. So
he asked me about all of my we went through my life with a fine-tooth comb. Every person that said something mean to me in the 4th grade. And I mentioned I had a long-term partner that I lived with for a couple of years, and he was shocked. He was like, oh, are you monogamous? I was like, yes, and also, how is that relevant? It was so weird, there was these preconceived notions about who I was, but also he was pretty old. He was kind of in the generation that I think birth control is for sluts, so. But he called my therapist. She was like, I was so uncomfortable with how many questions he asked about your sex life and who you have sex with and how many people you have sex with. And if you have sex with the same person more than once, or if you only have one night stands. She's like, how does another mental health professional have such an agenda? So his recommendations were request FAA review findings for significance to the applications for the special issuance medical certificate. If authorized, monitoring is recommended, including collateral contact at that time with the treating therapist and any psychiatry provider in the interim from the last assessment. Which is like very much not saying, hey, this person shouldn't fly. It's just way easier for the FAA to say no. He first sent it to my therapist, and she was like, well, it says here histrionic personality disorder, which is, for those of you who don't know, the last remnants of female hysteria in the DSM. I assume it's because I was there for birth control. The FAA is inherently such a risk-averse organization that they're not operating for the greater safety of everyone. All of their laws are not for pilot safety, they're not for passenger safety, they are exclusively like making sure no one can sue them. And so by saying you're not allowed to ever have been sad is more just saying like hide it from us so that when you do crash an airplane or like something does happen, no one can point to us and say we knew about it and we didn't stop you. Well, the letter got lost in the mail for a little while. So I didn't receive it. I called the regional flight office and asked them. And they told me over the phone that my medical had been rejected. Dude was just like, oh, yep, I remember your medical got denied. You can't fly anymore.
So you're not flying?
I am not flying.
How does that feel?
Terrible. I have actually not even been back to the airport since I lost my medical. We are headed to the airport right now to see my airplane. It will be the first time I see her since I got that letter. You know, it's funny, I feel like there was so much anticipation to this moment of like, I've been so scared to go back just because I didn't know what it would feel like. Look, for the first couple of months, just driving past any airport would make me really sad. Like I had my emotional month of turmoil, and there still is. I think like it still pisses me off and makes me really sad, and like this piece of myself is missing. Oh, and there's cobwebs. A little bit of oil. A little bit of dirt. I didn't realize when I parked her here. Like, you can see the way I left this airplane. It's like, I was gonna come back. It smells like I'm gonna go flying, and I'm not gonna go flying. I definitely let myself be like consumed with sadness for probably the first week. And then, I mean, my job is to dig myself into like unsolvable problems and then dig myself back out Yeah, so there's only so long I could really let myself be sad before I have to start thinking like, okay, well, what am I gonna do next? Oshkosh is the world's biggest fly-in, so it's like this huge airplane festival. Over 10,000 airplanes fly in every year. It's amazing. I ran into the pilot mental health campaign at Oshkosh. I ended up talking to them for like an hour and a half. It was this immediate feeling of how do I get involved? How do I help?
PMHC was founded as an all-volunteer organization made up of aviators from across the country to come together, put policy together, talk to lawmakers, and try to get this changed so that we can improve lives for pilots.
I think I've made a risk matrix in my mind of the highest likelihood of me flying has always been shut up, sit down, don't say anything, make my YouTube videos about my little projects, and be quiet. And by choosing to say something, I sort of like chose that my personal ability to fly is less important than the greater good of like the aviation community. And living that has been like a little bit of a roller coaster of emotions. There have definitely been days where I'm like, why don't I have the ability to just be quiet and like stay in my lane? I know so many pilots who are deeply affected by the FAA's like incredibly backwards policies on mental health. You guys can look at me and it's like, oh, this girl lost her hobby, like boohoo, that sucks. The reason that I am the one saying something is because I am the only one who can, because it is only my hobby. Like my income does not rely on my ability to fly. Everyone who has ever stepped foot on an airplane is entrusting their life in the hands of a pilot that they have never met. And like, I personally would like to know that that pilot is not suicidal and unmedicated and unable to get help.
Chris Finlayson here, the executive director.
Finally, now we have an organized and cohesive movement to go to Capitol Hill, to go to our government, to say, hey, we are no longer okay with this. The flying public is no longer okay with this. We have our Advocacy Day that we're holding on April 2nd. So we're gonna go to the Hill. We're gonna go and introduce the Mental Health and Aviation Act. The flying public knows that humans have mental health issues. The flying public knows that those mental health issues can be readily treatable. And they also know that it's better to get treatment than not get treatment.
I applied for a grant with the Sloan Foundation to build an airplane, which is my dream project on this channel. And the grant was like, I want to build this airplane from scratch and then fly it at the end of the year. They asked me to do like a 2 or 3 sentence acceptance speech at the conference where they were announcing the prize winner. And what I said was something like, ever since I was a little girl, like the only thing I have ever really known about myself is that I needed to fly. Basically, the biggest commitment of my life has been aviation, and without it, it's like hard to know who you are anymore. These are original plans for Pete and Pole Air Camper. It's a 1929 design, and I will be building it for the rest of the year. And while I'm doing that, I will be appealing to the federal air surgeon to get my medical back in hopes that when she's finally ready to fly, I will be the one that flies her. This has been the most difficult video of my entire career, and I have waffled so much on whether or not to like be public about this. And in the end, I decided that I had to because I want to help create change in the world. I think it's really, really important. And if you feel the same way, there are 3 main things you can do. The first one is to donate to PMHC. They're an entirely volunteer-run organization, so all of that is going directly to advocacy work. The second is to sign up for their newsletter so you can find out about opportunities near you. And the third one is to call your congressperson. Like, they listen and we need help. So we'll put information on how to do that down in the description below. And thank you so much for the support. It really means the world to us. Thanks.